Welcome, everybody, to the Wednesday morning series. This is the third week, but Troy Love is here. We're talking about typically attachment wounds, but betrayal trauma, the addiction, the underlying wounds that keep us chained to that. So I hope you're doing well, Troy. Glad you're here.
I am. Thank you. I'm very grateful to be here.
Oh, this is the first question. Can Troy share about avoidant attachment? Thank you.
Absolutely. So it comes from attachment theory, and the three main categories of attachment theory are avoidant, anxious, and secure. There's a couple of others that are also in there, but so if you kind of look at it as on a spectrum, so on one side we have anxious attachment style, in the middle we have secure attachment style, and then on the other end we have avoidant attachment style. And to kind of give you an example of how they tested this, they did this with little kids. They bring these little toddlers into a waiting room. It was called the strange situation experiment. And they would bring these little toddlers into like a doctor's office type of waiting room with their parent. And then there would be some stranger in the room. And the stranger would try to interact with the little toddler and see how the toddler responded, and whether the toddler like became all clingy to their mom and scared of the stranger, or if they didn't seem to matter that the stranger was there, or if they like started interacting with the stranger. Why did we do these things to kids? I don't know, but we did. And so then eventually what would happen is that the parent would leave and leave the little kid in the room with the stranger, and then see what the kid would do. And the kid might cry. The kid might not react at all. And then if the kid was in distress, then the stranger would try to provide comfort to this child. And what they were testing was what kind of an attachment the child had. So if they had an anxious attachment, they were very clingy, and that stranger in the room did not feel safe to them. And so they were very clingy to mom or dad, and they didn't, they'd be shy, and they didn't want to interact, and they weren't free to like roam around and play with the toys and anything that was going on because they were so afraid. If, however, when mom or dad came back in the room, if the little kid was mad at them, they would not interact with them at all. They would turn their back. They wouldn't interact. They would not connect. And that was what we'd call an avoidant attachment style. So they didn't know how to tell their parent, because they're little, they didn't know how to tell their parent that they were upset. Why would you leave me in this room with this stranger that I don't know? And this person was trying to help me out, and it's really overwhelming. And so they would get mad, and they'd like push the parent away, and that was an avoidant attachment style. And then there were some kids who were just like, mom will be back, like we're cool. And that's the secure attachment. And so they could measure they could tell kind of what kind of attachment style that person had. So that kind of gives you an idea of what these attachment styles look like. So in adults, anxious attachment style is, please don't leave me. Are you going to be there? Oh, you didn't answer my text when I called. What's going on? And stories going on in my head. They're probably, they're doing something. And I feel this anxiousness inside, and I just really need to know that you are part of me. Avoidant is like, they almost shut down their emotions. It's not that they don't have them, but they shut them down, and they push people away, and they are very aloof and disengaged a lot of times. So they can be very charming. If you think about the dating pool, there's a lot of people in the dating pool who are avoidant. Why? Because they don't connect. They don't look to actually have attachments. So they feel very comfortable kind of being out there, but they they'll go on dates and they'll do things, but there's a standoffishness, and they're like, don't get too close. I don't want you to get too close. It feels uncomfortable for me. And so they won't share their feelings. They will just try to protect themselves in a different kind of way. And so that kind of gives you an idea of the two spectrums of attachment style.
So I just want to clarify this because sometimes it's like people, I think, wonder if, can I have an avoidant style with one person but be secure with another, or is it across the board? I always have an anxious avoidant or whatever style.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I have come across research, and there's a questionnaire that one university has online that you can fill out, and you can fill it out for just your partner, or you can list like moms, dads, other people. And it's interesting when they plot it out on this XY graph, you can have one attachment style with one person and in a different attachment style with another. In the beginning, they kind of thought that was your general attachment style. You tend to be more anxious or tend to be more avoidant. And maybe that's true in general, but if there is safety in a relationship, it may not be that way with that particular person. So it is fascinating that I might have an avoidant attachment style with one particular person because they just do not feel safe and I'm not going to open up to them. And with another person, they mean so much to me. I'm so afraid they're going to leave that I'm more clingy with them. And I doubt myself. So it isn't black and white. Like you have an anxious attachment style or you're avoidant. It's not black and white. It really does depend on the kind of relationship that you also have with that person.
So can you so we talk about betrayal trauma. So there's a fracture in a relationship. So I'm thinking that you may perceive that you have a secure attachment with somebody, but then there's this betrayal. So then with the fracture, it could shift,
Mm-hmm.
but
it often does.
And then it could potentially work back to a secure attachment.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
often does. And you and I have both seen it with betrayed partners. They become very anxious and they begin checking their partner's phone and tracking them where they go. And they wondering what happens when who they're looking at the supermarket and all those kind of things. It's all very anxious because they're afraid they're going to lose this person. On the flip side, there's some who are like, see you later, dude. You're out. And that avoidance, like, nope, I'm not doing that. So that happens due to trauma, and it's understandable that happens. And then the hope is that if through some intervention, you can come back to that place of secure attachment, that enough trust is rebuilt, behaviors have been changed, addictive behaviors have been changed so that I can breathe and I can feel safe with you, and I don't have to worry that you're gonna leave and be dishonest. That's the goal that we hope for most couples.
Well, and I would hope that even when there's a fracture like that a betrayed partner is still able to find, but I'm securely attached to this person. So it isn't everything's, and I know that in the moment it's very challenging, but if someone's able to go, okay, it isn't that all humanity is horrible and betraying me. It is, we've got some really big issues with this one, but these people still can be trusted to be support. So good stuff. Thank you, Troy.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Next question. Wife of a sex addict for 12 years, D-Day 11 years ago, trickle disclosure over the years. Oh, my heart breaks for you. My husband had 7 months of sobriety, no recovery. He is in active addiction at the moment for the past 3 months, webcam chat, massage with happy ending, and prostitutes. He is not willing to do more than what he's doing, that is seeing a CSAT and going to one 12-step meeting a week. My question is, when do I leave? We are in a home separate. in an in-home separation already because he's not following my boundaries. I've been telling myself that I'm staying because of my 3 kids, 11, 9, and 4, but am I lying to myself? Is this life worse for them than coming from a divorced home? My husband also suffers from depression and suicidal thoughts, so I'm scared that he will do something to hurt himself, and then my kids will be left without a dad. Thanks for your help.
You have a lot on your shoulders,
Yeah.
a lot of pressure. And so my heart is with you, and I'm sad that this is what you're going through. I can't tell you when you should leave. What I can tell you is that you will know. If that is what is right for you and is in the best interest of you and the people that you love, you will know. There will be a feeling that comes inside that gives you the sense that although I have all these fears and I'm worried about my kids and I'm worried about my husband, it's going to be okay. And when that feeling comes, I would hope that you would honor that. And I'm not suggesting you leave him or not, but oftentimes what happens in betrayal is we lose sight of that sense inside that tells us things like due to gaslighting and other things, we lose sight of being able to trust ourselves and that intuition that a lot of women have. And so part of that is tuning into that. I'm hearing that you're asking some really good questions. Is it better to stay in a 2-parent family for my kids, or is it better to divorce? And again, I cannot answer that question for you. Every situation is different. There's nuances in every situation. I would say, though, to honor what is in the best interest of yourself. And I'm not saying that from a selfish place. I'm saying that from a core value perspective. Stephen Stosny often talks about when we're tapped into our core value, we will make better decisions for ourselves and our loved ones. And so it's tapping into what your own sense of worth is, tapping into your sense of value and their sense of value for your children. And then from there, making a choice. Now, I have had clients whose husbands have behaved in a really, really harmful and hurtful ways, and their intuition is to not leave. And they, and they have a higher power, and they pray to God and say, I don't understand this. I should be out the door. And the feeling they continue to get is to wait. And I've had clients who they get the feeling like it's time to go, and then they go. So I can't tell you why this person got this answer and this person got a different answer. But I watch, as I watch their lives, and I watch the things that happen, they are working on honoring themselves. And when they do, they have a sense of peace. It does not mean that either path was easier than the other, because I watch them and it's hard. But they have learned how to trust themselves, which is beautiful, beautiful. And so out of all of that, what I'm hoping you can do is trust yourself and to reaffirm that you will know if that is the right decision. You will know.
And all great. I want to tag on because I feel so compelled to about the, he's suicidal, and I wonder what will happen if, you are not responsible. He has made it really clear he is not willing to do more than this. He's in active addiction. But to me, it feels like, you feel like it would be your fault if, if he chooses, chooses suicide. So, you would not be. It is his choice. He has options. He has qualified professional helping him, and he's still choosing that. I was in a situation, and I was in a situation, it's called a previous marriage with somebody anyway. So, and, ultimately, and everybody, I agree 100% with Troy, but my situation was, I finally went, is this what I want I had one child. Is this what I want for my child? Is this relationship, am I modeling, what I want for my child? And that was a huge decision factor, for my decision, again, whatever your journey is. But I think, looking at it as having two parents, I think it really is also two healthy parents. If he's interacting with the children and it's really solid, in your home with the in-home separation, that's very key and telling for you. If he's there but he's just there, then you're still the single parent, but I agree. I see this all the time too. I think, your head and your heart can know things differently. And when those align, you just know. And it may be that, like Troy said, you stay, forever. And, the best course would be he goes, oh, wait, I really need to get my act together. And I'm really going to commit to this recovery thing. I always hope and pray, for that. That's what we have a treatment center for, so that we can help these guys, shift and change. So tough stuff. You take care of you. We talk about put your oxygen mask on first. Glad you're here. I hope he's seeing a therapist. I hope you're seeing a qualified professional to help support for the level of trauma and all of the huge stuff you have on your plate. I'm glad you're here. Hope you join the Betrayed partner groups on our website as well. So tough. I hate that addiction, just it causes so much. But recovery, shifts everything. So he's really missing out on you and the kids and life. So, okay. Are there any personal tools that you can suggest for people in recovery who are working through attachment trauma as it manifests in or through the body?
Beautiful question. So it is going to manifest through the body, as Dr. I can never say his name.
Bessel van der Kolk.
That's the one.
Good
the body
Dutch name.
score. It gets lodged in our body. Peter Levine as well. Trauma gets lodged into our body. So it does, at a cellular level. So I'll share with you a couple of strategies that I have learned from Dr. Levine and some others. One is what we call butterfly hug. Comes from EMDR. There's a couple of ways to do it. Mine is to make a bird with your hands like that. So you interlock your thumbs, and then you just put it right here. And then you just slowly tap left and right, and you just breathe. And sometimes people will think of like a beautiful image or scene being on the beach or somewhere, but you don't even have to do that. You just sit and breathe. And most of the time when people do that, within about 30 seconds, they feel their body begin to shift. So that's one of them. Dr. Levine talks about putting one hand on your forehead. So you put your right hand on your forehead and your left hand on your heart, and you just hold it there. And again, you just breathe. And if your mind wanders, that's okay. You just hold it there for a moment until you start to notice that your body starts to calm down. And then he'll move his right hand down to his tummy after a minute and hold it there for a little while. And just kind of breathing in, just noticing that breath coming in and out of your body, and just allowing your body to regulate itself. It's really actually really good at that when we give it space to do that. Another one that Dr. Levine talks about is the somatic hug. So you take your right hand and you put it under your left armpit. That's a little closer to your heart, that's why. And then you're going to take your left hand and you're going to give yourself a hug. But as you're doing that, you can feel your body. And so what he talks about with doing that is like, you can feel where your body is and isn't. Like, so my body's here and it creates a container. I know where I am. And so again, we just breathe and we hold that and we can just feel where we are. And it's like, I'm here and I'm safe. And we just hold it. And when I say hold it, like hold it for 5 minutes, hold it for 10 minutes. Until your body starts to calm down. Another one is often called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and there's various versions of that. But for me, it's 5 things that you can see right now. So you just notice, like, what are 5 things that you can see? I can see pictures in my office. I can see the camera. I can see Tammy nodding her head. I can see my cup. I can see, and what that does is helps me begin to be centered, like grounded into what's going on. And then 4 things that I can hear, or 4 things I can touch. So tactily, like 4 things that I can touch. So I can touch my desk, I can touch my mouse pad, I can touch my shirt. So 4 things you can touch, 3 things that you can hear. And so then I'm listening and I can hear the traffic outside and I can hear the air conditioner and all of that. What it's doing is bringing me here into this present and here and now. There's so much beauty about being in this moment. Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, and Thich Nhat Hanh and other people of that spiritual nature talk a lot about being in this present moment. Then 2 things that you can smell or taste. And then what I end the one with is something that I'm grateful for. So those are some tools that a lot of people have used to just get themselves here. The last is to breathe, and to breathe from your diaphragm. And a lot of people don't actually breathe from their diaphragm. So the easiest way to do that is just to lie on the ground. And when you lie on the ground, your body automatically breathes from the diaphragm, something from a flat surface, not like your bed, because your bed's soft, but something with a flat surface in your body will automatically breathe from your diaphragm. And the moment that it does that, it signals to your brain that you are okay, that you're not in an emergency, and it releases the chemicals in your brain that help you calm down. So those are just a few of the tools that might be helpful.
That's a great list. Thank you for all of those. Okay, next question. What are the best resources for partners of avoidance?
So first is to acknowledge that you have an avoidant partner and to try not to take it personally. They were avoidant before they met you. And it's like I said before, they can be really charming. They're very friendly. It's not like, but they don't let very many people in because either they've had trauma in their life or there's other reasons that have happened for them. And so they are really, really reluctant to let anybody in to see what's going on in their heart. What's underneath it is a tremendous amount of fear. Whether they will acknowledge that or not, they probably won't because they're avoidant, but there's a tremendous amount of fear. So when you're trying to connect and they seem to keep putting those walls up, first of all, to try really hard to not take that personally, which I know is easier said than done. But that attachment style they've developed over years and years. And like I said, the research started with these where kids were toddlers, 2 and 3 years old. So kids started to have these attachment styles long time before your partner ever met you. So part of that is recognizing that it might be helpful to find a therapist who is specializes in Sue Johnson's work, emotionally focused couples therapy. Sue Johnson's work is all about attachment theory, and she teaches her therapists how to help draw the she talks about the pursuers and the fleers, like the ones who flee and the ones who pursue. Typically the ones who are pursuing are either anxious or secure, and they're trying to draw their partner in, and then there's the one who's like running out the door. That's the avoidant. And she has taught her therapists who've trained under how to like draw the person in and create some safety so that you can have that kind of connection. So those might be, you could read her book, Hold Me Tight. That would be a place to start if you don't have a EFT therapist, but that would be great. There's several conversations she invites couples to have from that book that also might be helpful.
So on Dr. Sue Johnson, she did a podcast with Dr. Rob on the sex and relationship healing. I can't point to it right now. Anyway, which I have to say, Sex, Love, and Addiction podcast, you've done one too, Troy, just hit 1 million downloads. I was watching it yesterday. I took a screenshot. I watched it. I kept refreshing it, hit 1 million. I got a screenshot. So now it's over 1 million. So super excited about that. But on that podcast series, you can listen to that. And we've got a book list. And that book is also on the sex and relationship healing.com site under the book list. There's a lot of good books, and listed by category, like for partners, for addicts, for couples, so please take a look at that as well. So I have one more question before we go to the next one, because, if a toddler is exhibiting a certain attachment style, so is that like something that we are born with then, or is that something that is learned very, very early?
It's it's that nurture nature thing again, right? For some of them, they're born with that. Like you hear the extreme version of kids with RAD, reactive attachment disorder. Those are extreme avoidant attachment kiddos. Oftentimes they were born that way. It's not because of trauma. It's there was just something about them that they do not want to attach, and so they keep people at arm's length. So so they just noticed these kids, some of them, they have a tendency to be a little bit more avoidant. They have a tendency to be a little bit more anxious. And so some of that is just the way that we were born. And then depending on what happens as we grow up and how that is enforced or not enforced, or if they've experienced any kind of trauma on top of that, that can shift things too.
Thank you. So curious about that. Oh shoot, no. No, okay, I'm so good. I just didn't hit done. Okay. Is it possible to not have anxious attachment style, but also be pretty anxious in general? Also, what is the attachment style? Oh, this is a good one, of the majority of men with sex addiction or sexual acting out behaviors.
Yes, it is possible to have anxiety without having an anxious attachment style. Again, these are just theories, right? So you can be very anxious. What do you do with that? So with an anxious attachment style, it's about the relationship. So they are very anxious that the other person is going to leave or is going to walk out or abandon them or something. And so they become very clingy to that person. That's different than having generalized anxiety disorder, where I'm just really worried that something bad is going to happen, but I can't really put my finger on what it is, but just this anxious feeling, that's different. Your body is reacting kind of the same inside. Anxiety is anxiety inside, but it's more about, I'm afraid I'm going to lose that person versus something just doesn't feel right. So what you do for anxiety, you can also do for anxious attachment style because of the anxiousness side of things. But yes, you can actually have a secure attachment style and still feel pretty anxious about some of the things that are going on in the world. As far as the majority, I don't know the answer to that. So I'm going to just flat out say I don't know. I would guess it's across the gamut, probably not very many of them have secure attachment styles. So
I was gonna say,
I'm
missing
pretty,
is secure.
good.
So,
What I like I said, there's the two, but there's also avoidant, anxious avoidant attachment style, where they have both. And I would imagine that there's probably a high population of addicts who have both. So on one hand, they're very afraid that they're going to lose relationships, and then the next minute they're putting up walls and pushing people out. I can tell you that that's my attachment style. I get really worried, and then when my abandonment wound and my rejection wounds get hit big enough, man, I isolate and I will not reach out to anybody. It's like, boop. So I'll move from one to the other depending on what's going on in the situation. So I don't have the exact research. That would be something I would love to actually find out. I don't know. The idea is, though, we used to believe that once your attachment style was locked in stone. And that's not the case. Like, we've learned you can adjust things. If we create enough safety in a relationship, we can shift to a secure attachment style.
the Dr. Rob always says the come here, push away, come here, push away. And so I see that a lot. I have a feeling too, a little bit of it is, if you are exhibiting this sexual acting out behavior, then you may be a little bit more this. I mean, because we see that with different situations as well.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I guess it would depend on the type of acting out you are doing. Yeah,
right. But secure is probably not where they are.
Not it. No.
Yeah, they avoid that one. So, okay. Next question. I'm curious. My PASA husband and I have been separated out of the house for 10 months, and we have a 3-year-old and a newborn. He believes that his affairs didn't break the marriage, or he is saying that it's just my box that I'm putting around the marriage. Is this normal thoughts for someone with attachment issues, or is that more the addict brain?
Well, my question is, well, what do you believe broke the marriage? So that would be a thing I'd be wanting to know. It's interesting he's using the word box, because that's actually the way that men's brains work. We operate more compartmentally than women. Women's brains tend to be very connected to everything. There's a guy, Mark Gungor. He has a really funny marriage series out there, and he talks about men's brains and women's brains, and the men's brains are boxes and they don't touch. And if I want to talk about my car, then I'll pull out my car box. And if I want to talk about my kids, I'll pull out my kids box. And when I'm done talking about that, I'm going to put that back on the shelf, and I'm not going to talk about that again. But women's brains are powered by emotion, and they are, and it's a big ball of wire that everything's connected to everything. So it's interesting that he's saying that's your box, when I'm guessing that's actually his box, and that he doesn't want to pull out and look at. He didn't want to look at the possibility that his behaviors maybe did have an impact on the quality of the marriage. And so I think that is normal addict behavior. It's not normal behavior, if that makes sense. So I'm hearing that he's not really taking any ownership for how his behavior caused harm or caused betrayal in you, and therefore you don't trust him. And therefore, if you don't trust him, there's not a whole lot that you're going to do to be willing to be open and transparent and intimate with him. And I'm not talking just about sex. I'm talking about everything if there's no trust. And so it's interesting that he's not owning that. He's just wanting to say, well, that's your box. And unfortunately, if he doesn't shift his position and doesn't take any ownership, I don't think it's going to get much better.
So Dr. Eddie Caparucci and don't hold me to this, but I think it was April or May, did his webinar, and he talked about the wedding vows. So for those of you that are married, and he really did a great job of unpacking it. It's like, this is what both of you said. So that may be useful for you to review again on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. All the previously recorded webinars get put on that under the resource tab. So that may be helpful for the two of you. But, and I hear addict behavior because even if you show that to him, if he is completely digging his heels in that, all of this is your fault, and you just don't understand, or he should get to do whatever he wants to do, it is, you're stuck with a situation where he doesn't want to change. So what do you need to do for you? Healthy boundaries. I hear you, the separation. I don't know what the plan is. 10 months, is there a plan for if he does these things and you can get back together again? Otherwise, you're kind of stuck in limbo too. So, okay, next question. Is it typical for someone who is taking their first steps to recovery to feel that they don't relate to other men in the groups, or at least to deny that they could relate to them, where instead of taking what is helpful from a group, they judge the others that they are being open? Is this usual? Is this the case? Is it better to something off in groups until more therapy work has been done, or should he continue? He goes to meetings to check off the boxes. I'm not sure if eventually he will get used to it and settle in, or stop being so defensive.
I think it was a typo. Hold off. Is it better to hold off?
Hold off. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't know what that means.
I know.
Yes.
I'm trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so when we're dealing with this kind of addiction, there's a tremendous amount of shame. Oftentimes, the guy feels like he is the only one on the planet who's done the things that he's done, and what a horrible human being he is. And so he's really afraid. There's a lot of things that he's afraid of, especially if it's a local meeting. He's afraid that he's probably going to see somebody he knows, and then they're going to think bad things about him. That he's afraid if he tells his deepest, darkest secret, that it's going to be the worst thing that any of the guys in that group have ever heard in their life, and they're just going to think he's a creeper and never want to talk to him again. So there's a lot of fear that he may or may not be acknowledging that he has, but that's a really common, normal thing that they have. Like there's a lot of shame around that. And so they go in this room, and then they meet. And for a lot of guys, going into that room the first time, as scary as it is also really incredibly healing, because for the first time in their life, they hear these other men being open and talking about things that they never imagined in a million years that they would ever be able to talk about. And they look across the room and they see that this man looks like a pretty decent guy, and he doesn't seem like he's a creeper. And it's like, whoa. And so it gives a lot of guys hope. So what I'm hearing, like when he's judging others, what that gives me a signal is that he's still battling his own shame. There's a lot of shame, and one of the ways that our shame manifests itself is through what I call the royal. The royal is the shadow of shame that tells me that I'm better than everybody else and tends to judge everybody else. They're not doing their part, or they're idiots for whatever they're doing, or whatever happens to be. But that royal is a component of shame. So as I'm kind of reading that, it's very common, and he's really probably uncomfortable. Part of him probably hasn't decided whether he wants to stop. I'm hoping he will keep going. I don't know if his defensiveness will decrease. That will really be entirely his choice about that. But it is normal, and he's probably scared and ashamed. So that's what I'm guessing is happening. If he were willing to surrender a little bit and hear another man's story, there is probably a tremendous amount of things that he could relate to with that guy, even if that guy is doing behaviors that he'd never thought of doing in his whole life. Because when we really look at the wounds of loss and neglect and rejection and abandonment and betrayal and those attachment wounds, we all got them. And so if I don't focus so much on the behavior that that other dude is doing, but I hear his pain and his struggle, I can connect with that.
I'm in the keep going, because you don't know what's going to get said at some meeting. And even if he's there just checking off the boxes, something might break through the, through the shell. So I also I added to the chat, on the Seeking Integrity site, we have online work groups, and it's a little different, and the format is such where it's being facilitated, and there's homework and exercises to do that. So it can be a little less intimidating, perhaps. So that might be if there's 6-week courses, 90 minutes per week. Troy does them on attachment wounds. We've got another one starting in September. For this person new to recovery, I would highly encourage the Sex Addiction 101 Level 1 or Porn Addiction 101 Level 1, if it's been all online behaviors. But that might be, well, I know that those are fantastic groups and really solid foundational components, but that might be a different way of having him gather information, get an education, but also connect to at least the facilitator, but hopefully some other people in the group as well. So I put that in the chat. Okay, next question. My SPA husband is stuck in an immaturity, and it is overwhelming for me at this point. It has been a year, and after listening to a recorded argument from a year ago, I realized we have not moved forward. He has your book, Finding Peace, Going Deeper, and Why Men Struggle to Relate. He listens to anything you say, Troy. I have 2 very important people in my life who are in hospice care. I'm having health issues myself, and I need him to be mindful. Do you have any advice or words for him to hear on the recording, or to help me deal with my betrayal trauma and the rest?
I'm sad that you have a lot of people who are end of life, and it's and you're dealing with some stuff yourself, and it sounds like you're feeling really alone in all of that, and you're needing him to grow up and help and be supportive. And the interesting thing, I don't know if this is true or not true, but I tend to believe it's true, that when we start engaging in our addiction, our maturity stops. So most of these guys, they start to engage in these addictive behaviors when they're 14, 15 years old, and then their brain stops developing maturity wise. And so they grow up, but they're still 14, 15 years old in their brain. And then when they start to do recovery, then they start to grow up a little bit, but it takes a longer time than what we'd hope. So there's a couple things. I don't know, because he's because of where he's at, if he can hear you when you tell him. But if he's listening, I want you to try and hear your wife when she tries to describe her pain, her fear around losing these people that are in hospice care and why they are so important to her. When she talks to you about her fear of her own health issues and how overwhelming that is, and the painfulness that goes with that kind of loss, because she's talking about loss wounds here. When she tells you that she needs some help, and she might need you to help, like, do the dishes and take the garbage out, and if there's kids in the home, to maybe do something with them instead of checking out. I don't know the particular situation of your home, but if you can hear her pain without letting your shadows of shame get in the way, because they will, and they want to tell you what a horrible human being you are and what kind of crappy husband you are and why can't you do this right. If you can put them aside for a moment and hear her suffering and let that part touch your heart and breathe, and then say to yourself, what can I do to help? What can I do to make this even a teeny tiny bit better for her, easier for her? Is there anything I can do? And oftentimes we want to ask her, and that's great, but in this kind of situation, they don't like to be asked. And I don't mean to speak for you, but they don't like to be asked, well, what do you need? they want you to kind of figure it out yourself because they already are overwhelmed. They don't want to have to come up with one more thing to figure out what to tell you to do. They want you to figure out something. And so sit with it for a minute and say, well, what is it that you need? What could I help? And then ask, hey, would it help if I did this? Would that be helpful? Would it be helpful if I did that? Because oftentimes we'll come up with some solution and we'll run with it and we didn't check in and they're like, I didn't need it to do that. But just to check, but you come up with some solutions that might be helpful and then ask, hey, would that be helpful? And she'll say yes or she'll say no. So I love that your wife wants you to be supportive. That's what I'm hearing. And I'm sad for you. I want to say your name, but I'm not gonna. I'm sad for you that you're feeling so alone in all of this. I'm hoping you have some support for you. I know that we have an ability to grow up. We have an ability to step into being the men that we've always wanted to be, even if we didn't have very good examples of what that looks like. And sometimes that's why we go to meetings, so that we hang out with some men who've kind of figured it out a little bit, and they're older and wiser, and they teach us some things. But hopefully that's helpful. But I know I know it's tough. So I'm just hoping that what I said maybe was helpful.
Okay, next question. When bringing my hurt feelings to my husband, I want him to give me some positive affirmations and apologize. He often gets defensive and tells me he needs space or rest so he can better support me. It may take 24 hours for him to be willing to talk about it again. In the meantime, he seems normal and I'm in pain. Is it impatient of me to feel further dismissed if he makes me wait for an apology?
Okay, so John Gottman's work does show that it can take at least 20 minutes for a person's brain, once they've been triggered, to calm down. And for some people, it will take a lot longer. So if he's getting triggered and he's getting defensive, that's probably accurate that his brain has gone offline. And it's going to take a little bit of time for him to calm down. What he does when you notice that he seems normal is that he's not normal. He's just ignoring. He's just pretending that everything's okay. That's a coping mechanism that we often do, because having to go deal with that stuff is triggering. And so I'm just going to kind of pretend that that didn't happen. And then maybe you'll forget about it, which never happens, but you'll forget about it, and then we'll be good. So that is a normal behavior. It's not a helpful behavior, but it is kind of common. When I say normal, I mean common. It's common, and it's not effective, is what I'm saying. So it sounds like you have some needs that are not being met. I don't know what happens when you talk to him and say, hey, I need a check-in. One of the rules that John Gottman and often many of the therapists who train under him say is like, okay, if you're going to take a break, that's good. You can take a time out, but you have to make an agreement that you're going to come back and discuss the issue that started the thing after everybody's calmed down. You also always have to circle back. We can't just like walk around pretending that nothing happened, because then it leaves you feeling abandoned. So we have to always circle up. So part of that is saying, hey, it's fine if you need to take some time, but we've got to circle up and come back to having the conversation. The second is that it sounds like you're wanting him to apologize, and he may not be taking ownership for his behavior. And so then if he's apologizing, he doesn't mean it. He's just apologizing to make you happy, but he doesn't mean it, which doesn't feel good. Like, I would rather you not apologize to me if you don't mean it than to apologize and fake it. Like, I don't want that. So part of that is him maybe not, similar to what I just said with the last person, is him not understanding what happens to you during this period of time when he's walking around pretending that everything's okay? What's going on in your heart? Is that an abandonment wound that's being hit for you? Is that a rejection wound that's being hit for you? What does that remind you of from maybe when you were growing up? And trying to explain it to him without it being about him. Like when you're not talking to me and you're kind of walking around like everything's okay, it reminds me of a time when my mom, or reminds me of a time when my dad, or whatever. When we do it that way, it's easier for the other person to hear it and not think, oh my gosh, I failed again. It's like, oh, that sucks. I don't want you to feel that way. And then if he can hear that pain, it's easier for him to say, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize that was hurting so bad. I don't want you to feel that way. I will do better. I'm so sorry. And it's a little bit more meaningful, but he's got to hear about your wound in a way that's not telling him he sucks, in order to have the empathy that you want him to have and the apology you need. So that's on your end. How you can do that is like talking about the wound without making it about what he's done, but just in general, this is what my wound feels like. And then for him, making an agreement like, hey, I will circle back. I'm not going to just like walk around and pretend that this hasn't happened. I will come back and revisit this hard conversation.
Yeah, so I would encourage you, and we've talked about this on other webinars as well, but when you're not in that conflict, to have the conversation of like the 24 hours, I understand you need a break, but 24 hours, is too long. Can we agree to 20 minutes or half an hour, no more than an hour, and then do the circle back around, that Troy is talking about. And in 12 step, we talk about amends. I do say I'm sorry, but I really look at having the meaning behind it, and I feel an amends. Is if I'm saying I'm sorry, I've thought about what I've done. It isn't just in addiction. I was quick to say, sorry, and want it to all be behind me, and you should get over it. So amends is very different. It is that heartfelt, and it's not only I am apologizing for that, whatever it was, but I'm going to work on not doing that again. I would also encourage you to use your support. People hurt our feelings, and we have wounds, but I too have a massive abandonment wound. So when it gets poked, it really is challenging for me having the language to understand that was useful. So, but are there other people that you can, or journaling, or, doing something else, because waiting for him to grow up and be able to do all of that, you're there, hurt for 24 hours. So, I'm wondering if there's some support that you can get, do some things that are good for you to nurture you in the moment. And then, but hopefully, compress the time frame. But I do love what, Troy shared about, the you hurt my feelings is less effective this is my experience, then when this happens, I feel, and whatever is coming up for me, because otherwise it's you did this to me versus this is what's happening for me. So it's a different framework, and for us addicts, we can hopefully hear it better. So okay, next, we're going to run out of time. I apologize. You guys are asking great questions, so make sure you come back next month for these. So my PA spouse says, if two people love and respect each other, they don't need boundaries. Oh my gosh. Boundaries are another word for controls in a passive aggressive manner. Boundaries are keeping others at arm's length. Then he gave me a boundary. I pointed it out, and he said, if I respected and cared about him, he would not have to ask. How do I deal with that? Other than sticking to my boundaries, he's still in denial for port addiction. I'm going to find the link for Gavin Sharp. I just shared it with somebody else yesterday. Gavin Sharp did on December 3rd a webinar on why everybody needs healthy boundaries. So I'm going to find the link and put it in the chat. But Troy?
Good. Okay. People have security cameras on their houses to protect their house. Like if some random person came up to your house and was trying to sell you something, chances are you're not just going to open the door and let them come wide in and just like show them around the house and give them a tour. When your kids have friends over, you probably have rules about they're not allowed in the master bedroom, that kind of stuff. Those are all boundaries. Those are all boundaries. Why do we do that? Because we believe that we are what we have is worth protecting, that what we have is worth keeping safe and secure. So I'm not going to let somebody just randomly walk into my house, because the things that are in my house, including my children and the people that live there, are valuable to me, and I don't want harm to come to them. That's the same with this. So it is actually the opposite. When I love and respect somebody, well, I'll say when I love and respect myself, I'm going to have boundaries, because I'm going to have things that say, when you come into my space and you do things that cause me to not feel safe, that's not okay. And so the more that I love and respect myself, the more I'm going to have boundaries. It's actually converse. The less that I love and respect myself, the less boundaries I'm going to have. I'm going to let people walk all over me because I don't love and respect myself. So oftentimes addict husbands, or husbands hear when you set a boundary or have a boundary, that they feel like that's like a thing. The word just left me, but they don't like it. Well, of course they don't like it. Well, too bad. That's part of what it is, because I'm worthy of love and belonging. So how do you deal with it? You remind yourself that you are worthy of love and belonging, and that you are worth taking care of, and so are the people in your home. And so the more that you breathe into that, the easier it is. You don't have to enforce it. It just automatically happens. It's like, no, sorry, that don't work for me. And he may not like it, but that's okay. Person wants to come to my house and they can't either. And that's okay too.
And I go back to, I mean, it's a spouse. You guys, there was a boundary, there was a commitment when when you got married. That was a boundary, that we are agreeing to these things. So yeah, this sounds like a really active addict. Okay, betraying spouse says there is no incentive in our sex life except physical touch and release, and he can handle both himself when it gets tough. But he says he is no longer drawn to pornography. He says he has a procreative sex drive, and it is much stronger in some men. No distinction between procreative and recreational sex. A strong sex drive for my age, his words. I feel demeaned, the betrayed partner. I feel demeaned for having a lower sex drive. Is his first statement a red flag for acting out again?
It could be. Some people tend to have stronger sex drives than others. And when you have a betrayal trauma, your sex drive is usually not that high. In this relationship, it could be with somebody else when you leave. But so he's using terminology that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Sex is a beautiful way of connecting. Sue Johnson talks about the 3 levels of sex, and the first is sealed off sex, which we basically have sex just to have orgasm, and we don't really care about the other person. And then the bottom level is synchrony sex, where we're in sync with each other, and that's when we're in tune. And that can be really, really fun, and it can be really, really connecting, and most couples don't know how to get there. So most addicts are dealing with sealed off sex, where they just are going for the orgasm and they don't know how to go any deeper than that. So I don't want you to feel demeaned that your sex drive, I mean, I can't make you not feel demeaned, but people's sex drives change, and sometimes that's due to hormone levels and other things like that. But whatever his reasons are, you have your boundaries, and you can say, hey, this is what I need in order to feel safe going in this kind of way. And if you can't provide that, then we got to have a different kind of conversation.
And then we're going to end on this next one. Somebody put fear of what? I think that was going back to the anxious.
Yeah, I don't know.
Anxiety. Okay.
I'm think avoidant, probably fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, fear of betrayal, all those attachment wounds. But we ask the next one, because I think that's a
Oh, please. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm scanning through and I'm like, there's so many good questions. Betraying spouse has an LPC. He says she is telling him to stay away from groups. I think he may be fooling her because he is denying porn addiction. I have many emails and texts that I thought about sending his therapist so she can get better insight into the dynamics going on. My therapist is saying he is abusive and recommended no couples therapy for now. What is your suggestion in regard to sending these messages?
I don't think that therapist understands the power of group, for one. So that is something that I just, maybe they've never had any group exposure, but I don't know what the reason for that is. But to be honest, that is one of the fundamental recommendations of sex addiction treatment is individual therapy, group therapy, and meetings, both of which involve groups of people, because it diminishes shame, among other things, increases accountability, among other things. So I don't know if that LPC understands that. I would say if there is abuse going on, I wouldn't recommend couples therapy either until that abuse has stopped, and until that person has taken ownership of their abusive behavior, because I cannot in sound mind try to do couples counseling and bring you into a situation where he's going to say, even if he doesn't do it in the session, he's going to say and do things that cause you further harm and make your safety impaired. That's not going to improve the relationship at all. So I won't do it. And oftentimes we have screening forms when I'm doing couples counseling, and if that's a red flag, I will talk a lot with a couple before I will be willing to do that, because it will just cause you further harm.
So, and a couple things that I was reading. Uh, uh, First of all, it says an LPC. It doesn't say a qualified professional within this. Second of all, it says he says that she is telling him. Anything he says, like, I would be, unless you heard it directly from his therapist, which I don't think you have, I would not believe it. So, I mean, I can't tell you, how many of the clients that come to treatment have lied to their therapist for years, so they're checking off the boxes that they're going to, see a therapist, but this is really specialized work. So a generalist therapist, doesn't have the addiction training. It isn't just sex addiction that groups are recommended. It's any form of addiction. The opposite of addiction is healthy attachment. You can't, when I hear somebody who has been spinning for a longer period of time and all they're doing is seeing their therapist, even if they were seeing the best therapist in the planet, that isn't going to be enough. Addiction is a 24/7 issue. It's way more than the acting out. It's these deeper issues that Troy's talking about, the attachment wounds, all of that stuff, is we're using our acting out behaviors to fill those voids. Works on some level, but keeps people away and hurts us and everyone else. So this is what, to me, it's like, what healthy boundaries do you have to set? Because if he starts bumping up against your boundaries, therefore your protection, not punitive, but if he starts bumping up against those, then the consequences for him may be that, oh, I need to do something more indifferent. So but to me, he's lying to a therapist. The therapist probably doesn't have the specific training to deal with these issues. Most therapists aren't even trained in addiction. I mean, that's the so a huge mental health issue, and they're not trained to work with addiction. Of those that are trained to work with addiction, most are not trained to work with these specific issues. So it's challenging, but he probably likes his therapist because he can say his therapist is telling him, oh, you don't need to do any of that stuff. So challenging. So glad you're here. Lean into the support for you. Set healthy boundaries. There's lots of resources on how to set healthy boundaries for you, for your safety. Good stuff, and more questions. So that we won't get to. And it isn't personal about anybody. It's just the order that we're going through them in. So anyway, okay. So Troy will be back on the 4th week of August. Dr. Eddie Caparucci is next week, but lean into the resources on sexandrelationshiphealing.com. The work groups, we've got another betrayed partner work group starting in August, but the couples healing from betrayal is starting in September. Troy's attachment wounds in September. Lots of stuff going on, so join us. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.